This is Matthew Kratter's Bitcoin University. Today I want to talk about something that could end up killing Bitcoin if we don't nip it in the bud. First, some necessary background. Bitcoin mining pools collect transactions from all around the Bitcoin network and package them up into blocks. If a mining pool successfully mines a block, that mining pool or even solo miner gets paid the 3.125 Bitcoin block subsidy plus all the transaction fees from transactions that were included in that block. And at today's prices, that's nearly $380,000 worth of a block reward. Now, Bitcoin is a monetary network. Everyone knows this. It's the best money that the world has ever seen. It's not a cloud storage network for people's non-monetary data. Historically, the network has been quite hostile to non-monetary spam transactions like this, whether it was inscriptions, runes, ordinals, or op return, filling up a block as Mara did here. If Bitcoin nodes are functioning properly and refusing to pass along these kind of spam transactions from one node to another until they finally reach the node of a mining pool, if Bitcoin nodes are basically blocking this relay, a spammer has a number of different options that he can try. Number one, the best option really is to choose another blockchain to spam. It's wonderful when bad actors take their scams back to the crypto ecosystem where they originated and choose to put their spam on Ethereum or Solana instead of Bitcoin. Number two option, if the spammer is still intent on using Bitcoin to spam, they will run up against another deterrent, which is cost. Taking your Bitcoin spam transactions directly to a mining pool to be included in a block is a lot more expensive than letting nodes relay it around the network for free. And that's one reason they want to put the burden on Bitcoin node runners like you and me instead. We're like these free drug mules that they can exploit to carry their spam transactions. If a spammer takes a spam transaction directly to a mining pool instead, he will end up paying fees that are 100% or more higher than if he had just used the Bitcoin network to send this transaction himself. That itself is a significant deterrent. So for example, right now, Bitcoin transaction fees are roughly 5 sats per VByte to get into the next block. And if you want to submit directly to Mara, we can see it's double that. It's 10 sats per VByte. So spamming the chain using Mara will cost you twice as much if nodes are not relaying your spam transaction. So higher transaction fees that come from having to go direct to a mining pool like Mara are one deterrent against this sort of spam. If you're finding this video interesting so far, I'd just pause really briefly here to ask you to help to support this channel's educational mission. Hit the subscribe button, that does really help. Leave a like, leave a comment, question, suggestion for a future video, and share this video with a friend or family member. So higher transaction fees, that's one deterrent against spam. Another deterrent is timing, and it goes like this. No one wants to wait around for hours to see their spam included in a Bitcoin block. If you want your Bitcoin monitoring transaction to get included in a block in a reasonable amount of time, it makes sense to let it circulate around the network so that it has a greater chance of being picked up by a mining pool or even solo miner. Now, if you take your Bitcoin spam or monetary transaction directly to a mining pool, your settlement time, in other words, how long it takes to get included in a block and have enough blocks built on top of that to have reasonable settlement finality, this sort of settlement time is a function of how high the hash rate of that pool is compared to the overall hash rate of the Bitcoin network. Mara is currently about 5% of the Bitcoin network currently, so we would expect them probabilistically on average to mine about 5% of the blocks. That means 95% of the time a new block that's being found by the network will not be found by Mara. And that's bad news for spammers using Mara's direct submission service. So you have two deterrents working here against spam. Number one, going direct to a mining pool with your spam transaction costs more money and will also take more time to confirm on average. But there's a third deterrent as well. Blocks that contain spam transactions that most of the nodes in the network have not seen before will take longer to be verified by nodes. So for example, if a node sees a Mara spam transaction in a newly mined block that it hasn't seen before, that node will need to contact Mara's node or another node that has knowledge of that transaction. Now that's not a big problem, but it does take time. And in the time that is happening, another mining pool may have mined a new block that contains only transactions that all the nodes have seen before because they're monetary transactions and they're being relayed across the network. So if another mining pool has mined a new block simultaneously, in other words, what's called a race condition, where we have these two pools racing to figure out who's going to have their block added to the blockchain by all the nodes, that second mining pool's block may be included in every node's individual blockchain first, since it can be verified more quickly and since it did not require contacting the mining pool like Mara to get details about the transaction first. So when Mara mines a block full of spam, they're taking the very real risk that that block may not make it into the final version of everyone's blockchain, and Mara will have expended all that electricity in vain, approximately $380,000 worth of electricity on average per block, losing out not just on that transaction fees from that block that contained all the spam, but also the block subsidy, losing the block subsidy of 3.125 Bitcoin, which is where most of the block reward still is. So that's the third deterrent that applies, and it applies mostly to mining pools, but it also sort of applies to submitters of spam, since it can lead to long delays in their spam being included in a block. As I've said many times on this channel, Mara is cancer to the Bitcoin blockchain. They're very bad actors. They're greedy actors. The CEO regularly takes home $40 million per year. And I have no problems with CEOs making a lot of money, but what this company does, he definitely doesn't deserve to be compensated for that, because they're very poor stewards of the Bitcoin blockchain. The company regularly includes spam in their blocks. They're government bootlickers who once tried to cozy up to the US government by censoring non-OFAC compliant transactions from their blocks. So Mara has this long history of putting profits above being a good steward of the Bitcoin ecosystem, and it's finally catching up with them. Their stock has been performing quite badly. If you want to learn more about Mara being the worst Bitcoin mining pool and worst Bitcoin miner in America, I'll put a link to this in the description notes below so you can get some more background. Unfortunately or fortunately, Bitcoin has much bigger problems than Mara, and that's because there are only a few large actors in the world today that currently get to decide what gets included in a Bitcoin block. We have Foundry, and then we have all the related Chinese mining pools like Ant Pool and F2 Pool and Spider Pool, etc. But each of these are very large mining pools. We can see Mara here at about 5% of the network. So this is the problem, Bitcoin mining pool centralization. It's already an existential threat to Bitcoin. Once a mining pool gets to even 25 or 30% of the network, and we can see here Foundry's at 26%, and Pool, when you combine it with all its subsidiary pools and related pools, is definitely at that level as well. Once a mining pool gets to even 25 to 30% of the network, they can start to do serious damage if they so choose. They can fill up blocks with spam, as Mara has been doing. They can mine empty blocks. They can withhold new blocks from the network and start building on them before any other miners had a chance to see them. This is the problem with mining pool centralization. It's not commonly recognized, but you don't need 51% of the hash of the total hash rate to attack Bitcoin in a so-called 51% attack. 25, 30, 35% of the hash is more than enough to cause serious problems, as we're seeing now, for example, with the ongoing 51% attack, or whatever you want to call it, 30% attack on Monero. And this gets even worse if you're able to collude with other large mining pools and thus have control over an even greater percentage of the blocks that get mined. The only reason that Bitcoin is not being attacked by these large mining pools right now is because many of them are in the US and the regulatory situation has improved with the Trump administration, at least temporarily. Obviously, the political environment could change a lot with the 2026 midterms and 2028 presidential election. So this is something we really need to fix before that. We need to really fix Bitcoin mining pool centralization before it's too late. Fortunately, Ocean Mining is helping to solve this problem by allowing miners or hashers or mining rigs individually to mine together as a pool, share mining rewards while still giving power over what gets included in a block to an individual miner. In other words, allowing individual hashers to build block templates and decide which transactions get included in a block, rather than Ocean Mining deciding it. Ocean has also released a protocol called DATUM, which allows anyone to also solo mine and have a chance to make $380,000 or more if they mine a block. And I'll put a link to the video in the description notes below, how to mine Bitcoin at home, where I show you how you can do this at home. And I'll also put a link to Ocean's dashboard. You can see what the pool itself has mined, all these blocks down here, as well as the ongoing hash rate and how it's improving. So Ocean Mining and DATUM are probably the major way that Bitcoin mining pool centralization gets fixed. I haven't seen any other real solutions out there. And to be very clear, I have no affiliation with them. I'm not being paid by them in any way. Bitcoin Core devs are also extremely worried about Bitcoin mining pool centralization as well. They've said this in many places, but they take a different and rather odd approach to this existential problem. Rather than directing people to Ocean and DATUM, there's also Stratum v2, but that has currently almost zero adoption. It doesn't seem to be mining software that any other mining pool currently wants to use. So Bitcoin Core devs, rather than directing people to Ocean and DATUM, which is really the only solution out there, Bitcoin Core devs have come up with this novel idea that Bitcoin node runners should be forced to relay spam around the network. Now, one odd thing about this is that it goes against the entire history of Bitcoin culture. As I say in this video, which I'll link to in the description notes below, Bitcoin culture has always been anti-spam, as I display, as I argue in that video. Current Bitcoin Core devs' their idea is that if spammers keep going direct to direct submission mining services like Mars Slipstream, which we saw over here, if they keep going direct to direct submission mining services like Mars Slipstream, this gives larger mining pools an advantage over smaller mining pools. Spammers are always going to want to use a larger mining pool for direct submissions rather than a smaller mining pool, since larger mining pools have a much better chance of getting your spam transaction into a block sooner than a small mining pool. More hash means greater probability of mining the next block, as we said before. So Bitcoin Core devs are correct about this. When spammers go directly to large mining pools, it increases centralization of mining pools at the margins, since the larger pools get more business and thus can expand their operations even more. But here's what a lot of Bitcoin Core devs are missing, at least I believe they're missing. Mining pool centralization is bad. We all agree about that. And Ocean has a solution that will eventually fix this problem for good. It would be really nice to see some Bitcoin Core dev OGs come out and support Ocean and DATUM. And it's actually quite bizarre how little support there seems to be there. But there is something even worse than mining pool centralization, and this is something Bitcoin Core devs should keep front of mind. There's something even worse than mining pool centralization, and that's Bitcoin node centralization. Bitcoin node centralization takes place when it becomes too expensive or cumbersome to run a Bitcoin node, and node runners turn off their nodes, decide not to buy a bigger SSD to store the blockchain, or decide not to run a node in the first place because it's too expensive and takes too long to sync and has too many dust spam UTXOs to hold in RAM. If you spun up a new Bitcoin node recently, you're already aware of how much the process slows down when you start downloading the massive amounts of spam on the Bitcoin blockchain that were included in blocks in 2023 and 2024. And ironically, that spam was enabled by many of the same Bitcoin Core devs in action in 2023 and 2024 when they refused to fix Bitcoin spam filters that were broken when the Taproot upgrade was rolled out. If Bitcoin Core actually cared about mining pool centralization, I think they would show a bit more support for Ocean. If Bitcoin Core actually cared about Bitcoin spam, they would have added an inscriptions filter in 2023. So unfortunately, I'm forced to conclude that maybe something else is driving the decisions that Bitcoin Core devs are making. It's quite likely that some devs are being compensated by Bitcoin spam companies under the table or in indirect ways that involve actual monetary payments or favors, or more indirect ways like increased social capital and doing favors for their friends, this sort of thing. We actually have a potential disaster on our hands here, and that's because Bitcoin Core is about to make things even worse when they roll out the latest update, Bitcoin Core 30, which will probably be rolled out in October. And this is going to massively open up the blockchain to larger amounts of op-return spam. So what can you do to help? You can run a Bitcoin Knots node. Every Bitcoiner who wants to be self-sovereign should be running their own node, their own Bitcoin node, rather than relying on some corporation's node, for example. Bitcoin Knots software, it's a fork of Bitcoin Core that uses most of the same code, but it also updates the spam filters and does other necessary patches that Bitcoin Core devs have been negligent about. Bitcoin Knots offers Bitcoin node runners much more configurability and freedom than Bitcoin Core, which is becoming increasingly paternalistic. As a result of Bitcoin Core devs' arrogance and paternalism, Bitcoin Core is rapidly losing market share to Bitcoin Knots, and this is a rapid shift of the sort that we've never seen before in Bitcoin's history, the number of Bitcoin Knots completely going vertical in 2025 as this crisis accelerates. Now, everyone can help out here. You can help to protect the Bitcoin network from spam and from these bad actors by joining the revolution and running Knots yourself on your desktop, your laptop, or even better, running it on a personal server that you can connect to your home router, a personal server like Start9. Again, I'm not being paid or compensated in any way by any of the companies or products that I have mentioned or well mentioned in this video. The easiest way to get started running a Bitcoin Knots node is to buy one of these Start9 servers. Unfortunately, they're temporarily sold out. You can see the demand for Bitcoin Knots, but you can keep checking this page. Also, you can build your own node using a mini PC. You can build your own personal server. You can flash it with the Start the Start OS, the operating system that runs on Start 9, and you could do it yourself here for about $300, as Bitcoin Not Crypto shows. I'll put a link to this in the description notes below. You could also buy a node from ParmaNode, and as I understand it, he's going to be working on this and adding a couple more knots options, but this currently supports Bitcoin knots as well. So when Start 9 is sold out, you can also go to parmanode.com. I'll put a link in the description notes below. Again, I'm not being paid to advertise this, just trying to give you guys a lot of different options and different ways at different price points to run Bitcoin knots software. Also put a link to this video running Bitcoin knots and why you should as well. So to answer the question that was basically stated in today's video, how does Bitcoin die? It dies when a lot of real Bitcoiners stop running nodes and outsource this to big corporations like Coinbase and BlackRock and other companies. For example, like Ethereum does with Infura and other corporate node runners, because no one really runs a node anymore. In Ethereum, the nodes are the amount of data is too large, and you need industrial strength servers to do it. So this is not where we want Bitcoin to end up. What makes Bitcoin unique is that so many of us, you and I, run nodes and enforce the Bitcoin rules for ourselves. And that's how we can continue to push back against spammers and even continue to push back against Bitcoin Core and the devs there if they continue to make decisions that increase spam on the network. Also, if we work together as a community and continue to call out the bad actors like Mara, crypto VCs like David Bailey, who fund these spam companies, if we all work together and we run Bitcoin knots as well, we can solve these twin problems of mining pool centralization and Bitcoin spam. If we lose this battle, however, Bitcoin's unique value prop of being decentralized because of the decentralized node network, and also being neutral money because it's decentralized and no one has control over it, these unique value propositions will be lost. And if they're lost, you can expect Bitcoin to trend to zero over time if that happens. We're not there yet, but we do need to fix these things. We need to fix these things soon. If you're wondering who's getting rich from Bitcoin spam, I didn't go into it this much in today's video, but I'll put a link to this video in the description notes below so you can read up more on that if that's something that interests you. You can see really who the bad actors are. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit the subscribe and like buttons. Hit the notification bell if you want to be notified when I publish my next video. And let me know your questions and comments in the comment section below. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.